today. Today's video is going to be part of a series which I'm starting on Flow 101, and today we're going to talk about screen flows. So this is a more beginner version because I got requests to actually make videos on more beginner flow. So if you are intermediate and if you already know all the basic elements of flow, this video is probably not going to be for you, but feel free to share with anyone you think will be benefited who is getting started in learning flows. And we're going to also cover what are the different use cases that you can use screen flows for, and I'm going to start up with an example. So today's example is we are on a case page and you want the customer service agent to be able to not only see the contact information here as on the screen, also being able to edit it. So let's say if a person calls in and your case page gets opened up, without the CSR agent doesn't need to go to the contact in order to say, oh, maybe there's no phone numbers and no email, right? So you probably want the CSR to be able to edit that email right from here on this page. So this is a very good use case for screen flows. And yes, we have certain things that the quick actions can do. You can write a quick action, but for some use cases you cannot write quick action. In those scenarios, screen flows really come in handy to quickly populate a screen and guide the CSR or anybody through that screen so they can update records there. All right, so let's get started. So I'm here on the flow, and actually when you start the flow, you will select screen. So from your setup, go to flows, and here new flow, and we're gonna cover screen flows today. So when you are selecting, you have multiple types. So I'm gonna select screen flow, and that will create, and here we are on the flow builder. Okay, so let's take a look here at different things that's on the screen. We have elements and manager. So what elements has, it has all the components or elements that you can use to make that flow. On the manager, what you'll see later is all the variables that I'll create will be stored under this manager. So elements has interaction, logic, and data. So as it says, interaction is the screen. This is the screen that eventually at the end you will see on the screen, and this is what will be accessible on the Lightning page. Action are more about, you have email actions, Apex action, you can also call Apex from here, and other different sorts of actions. So if I pull up here, you can say category, type, Apex action, email alert. So those are the most widely one that I have used, but I'm sure there are these different types. So you can also select like global actions from here. So all the contact actions will appear. So all the quick actions of the object can also be appeared here. So that's very cool action and a very useful element as well. Subflow is when you write a very gigantic flow, so one record at a time, because to understand the multi-creation of records, you do need to understand a little bit more about the list type, variables, and a little bit of Apex will be really helpful. And this is a really advanced feature for which delete records. So you can do a lot of stuff that you do with flow in the process, but delete records is something that's not available in process builder as well. So those situations you'd use delete records as well. All right, so I think we covered all the elements. And right here, this is a really handy feature if you're building a big flow, especially if you have tons of screens and you just want to quickly copy and clone. So yeah, you can definitely use that for, all you need to do is click on the element and then just click that, and then it will just copy a clone of your existing element. All right, so enough of this explanation. Let's build some flow. Okay, so first thing I want to do is let's go back to that record page, and what we need is get the contact information. So we need a screen to display the contact information. So first of all, we need to get the contact. So I'm going to say get records, get contacts from, we're getting it from the case page. And what are we looking for? we're looking for contact, and the moment you select contact, you have filter contact records. So here, conditions are met. Obviously, you don't want to bring all the contacts, right? So this is where you will actually type what condition your contact should meet. So if you know, what you need to select is case has a field called contact ID. So whatever contact is equal to that ID, that's what you want. So ID equals contact ID. So we don't know what the contact ID is yet, but we will know soon. So here, let's say where contact ID, and I'm just gonna say text. We can leave that alone. And so remember that the contact ID, we haven't assigned anything to this to yet, so it's empty at this point. So ID equals contact ID, and we only need the first record because we know that one ID is only for one record. It's unique, so there's no way you can have more than one contact for the same contact ID. And you can either store all fields. So this is very new in flows. You can automatically store all fields, you can choose fields and let Salesforce do the rest, and advanced option. So for today's video, we're just going to go with the basic one. But what these two does is choosing this will create a variable for you, and you can choose what fields you want to store. This one is, it will not create a variable, so you'll need to create your contact object variable by yourself, and then you need to actually create those variables and store them in those variables. So I'm just going to select this one. Sure, delete. So see how when I choose that, everything else goes away. So that means you don't need to do anything else. It's literally going to store all the contact fields on that variable. Hit done. So we got the contacts. Now we also need to get a case, because the case is what carries the contact field. So we need to get that as well. So case. And now what's the criteria for case? We know that when you're calling the case from this app, the field or the flow will be on this case page. So we know that we are on that record ID. So basically, and this is something very specific to flow, you need to say ID. And it's also mentioned in documentation. This is very important, and it needs to be exactly this, constant variable, and it needs to be called exactly record ID. Whenever you're using anything that will be launched from an action or will be put on a page and you want to pass the record ID, it should be named record ID. If it is something else, it will not work. So, and let's just say available for input. And later when we populate this on the page, it will give you an option that pass record ID, and you can check that box. I'll show you. So ID equals record ID, and obviously only the first record. And for this one, I'm actually going to say, we can just, for simplicity, let's just store all the fields. But we need to make another change. So store all the fields. So this is the first thing, and let's start connecting these. Get records, get contacts. Now if you have noticed, we didn't populate the where contact ID, so that's fine. What we can do now is, since we already have the case, see how it already created variables for you automatically. You didn't have to do anything. So all I need to do is get case contact ID. And you don't need the caret, you just need the actual contact ID, so we'll just keep typing. And it's very similar to process builder if you have used that process builder. So the experience is very similar, and that's it. So we got the contact, we got the case, and then we got the contacts. Now what's left is actually using the screen to put those values in. And for this, what's the important, and again, so since we're on the screen, let me quickly show you what else it has. So we have input, display, and custom. Input is where you'll be spending most of your time. It has all the different field types: address, currency, date, time, even dependent image. You can show images, and a lot. This is like, and Salesforce keeps adding a lot of more advanced input features like lookup was very new. It was not possible until like few releases back. Email and address. So there's really cool features here, and you can it always keeps adding up. So it's really interesting, and definitely keep a track of what's available before actually building your custom. And display text is just to display something, like a success message, for example. And then custom. Custom will have all your Lightning components that you can display on the screen. If your developers build the Lightning components, you can also show that here. And also like install packages components. All right, so for this case, we need the name, and the name will automatically have first name and last name. And so I'm just going to say con name. And naming convention is really important because when you start building long flows, it gets very confusing very quickly. So first name, and here you can leave this empty, but leaving this empty will mean there will be no name on the screen. So what you want to do is leave it, give a default value, and the default value will be coming from the contact. So if the contact has name, it will automatically populate that. So first name, because name is a combination of first, last, and middle name. So we have first name, and in the last name, we'll just choose that get record element that we created, dot last name. And now the first part is actually what are all the default values. Then you can also set component visibility. We're not going to talk about that today. And then here you can also say store output values. So basically the whole idea is actually to update the contact. So let's say if somebody says, oh, my name is changed now, it's not John anymore, or whatever, it's Jonathan. So you want to store that change in a different variable. So this is where you actually need to create a new resource and say variable first name that was changed, and data type will be text because that's a name. And we don't need this here, but this means, like, let's say if you're passing your flow, calling the flow from a process, then available for input will be, you need to check that so that the process builder can access the flow variables. In this case, we don't need this, but just FYI. First name, and then also last name we can say, and same thing. And always add description, or at least make sure your name is descriptive enough. Last name. And just to make this video go faster, we're just gonna add phone, and that's it. But you can add address, and it's the same process. So you need an API name. Label would be phone, that's fine. And then again, we need to enter a value here, which is going to be the contact dot phone. Okay, we have a phone field. Awesome. And again, we are going to give it a value, which is output values. So variable var phone. And we are doing all this just, and the phone can actually be text. But there are other variables available, like if it's a date field, you want to make sure it's date. But usually phone, email, text, first name, last name, they all come under the text. Hit done. So one thing to keep in mind is, because we are using this standard Lightning components inside the flow, we have to define all this. But let's say if I just use like a simple input element, let's say just a text. No. If I just want to use a text, then I don't need to do all that. I can just literally define, and that's it. And then you can refer it later. But just because we are using all these standard components, we need to define those things. We don't need that. Remove this. And another thing is, you also need to label the whole screen. So I'm going to say contact screen, something. API name will be pre-populated by itself. And that's it for this one. and you have the screen. So the next thing is we need to update that contact. Okay, so update contact. And so here we can say, you can either say use the IDs and field from a record or collection variable. In order to use this, you need to already do assignment beforehand. So you need to use an assign and assign those values, and then you can directly put that record variable, like let's say this one here, and then it will update it. But in our case, we can just use specify conditions to identify records, then set fields individually. So we're going to set field individually because we only have 2 fields to update. That's the name and the email. So filter the contact records. Again, it's going to be the same contact that we already got, that we already found, and that was case from get case dot contact ID. It's the same step that I did in the first step. So getting the same contact again, and now we're updating the name, or actually first name, to, now if you remember, we created the var first name and var last name, so that's what we're going to update it here. Last name will be var last name, and then one more field was, I think I chose phone, so phone, and then there was a var phone field. There it is. Okay, so here, just to recap, we specified conditions to identify records, basically this part. So we are saying, give me the contacts where ID equal to case.contact ID, which is the same case we are on. And then set fields values for contact records. So we are saying first name equal to this, last name, and phone. If there are other fields, you would assign them here. And we can talk about this in a separate video, how to use the IDs for record or record collection. Let me know if you are interested. Hit done and update records. And at this point, we are done. It's not going to look very fancy, but this is definitely, we can save this and try it out. Contact screen. And there's also an advanced feature, and this is something new I want to show, is you can actually define how do you want to run the flow. So let's say if the contact person does not have direct access to those fields, the flow will fail unless you actually say system context. So system context will ignore the FLS basically. And hit save. And one thing, and there are quick other features that I want to show here. Run, I don't use that much, but debug is very nice, cool feature. What it lets you do is actually debug it before you activate it. So before you actually put it outside, put it out in the world, you want to debug it and make sure that it actually is working. And this is the first time I built this, so let's see if it's working fine or not. We'll find out. So let's put the case ID, because that's how the record ID is going to be. So I have the first name Tima, last name Shri, and the phone field. So I'm going to say something here. It's too long. Okay, and hit and if you see the right side, it will tell you what happened. Pretty much Srivastav started the flow. This is the record ID. We got the case, so it's saying, well, record ID equal to this. Store values of these fields in get case, and we define, if you remember, contact ID and ID. And then we're getting the contacts from case. So we're saying this is the contact ID that it found, and it actually successfully found the records. So that's all that happened so far. And then I put it here and I hit next. Now, it's actually going to tell me, and this is what Lightning component means. So these are standard Lightning components. I didn't build this, nobody else built this. It's Salesforce provided it for us. So first name, get contacts dot first name, that's Tima, last name, and here we have phone, which is also dot phone. It was null initially, but then I added that value, so it's value, and update records, and it will also tell me all the records that meet the criteria are ready to be updated when the next screen pause or local action is executed. All right, so it looks like we are looking pretty good. We can go ahead and activate it. We didn't get any error. So now once you activate that, you want to go to edit page. So there are different ways to put this. You can either have an action launching it, create an action and refer that flow from an action, and action can only refer screen flows. So, but in this case, you can also just pop it on the page. So let's say flow, and I'm just gonna say it right here because contact information is really important, and I want all the users to edit the contacts. And pass record ID. So it just takes it right away. Hit save. And as per this feature, you actually don't really need to make it record ID. You can have it anything, and then you can just pass it to the variable. But if you are planning on using this flow as a flow that's being launched by a button or action, then you do need to make sure that it's record ID. That's why that's very important. And then save it. Go back and let's see if we can see our flow. And the screen flow can actually be used in multiple places in the system. You can use it in the Lightning page as an action, also drop it in the community. So since we already debugged this, that actually did take it here, updated the actual contact. So yeah, while you're debugging, always make sure that you're debugging on test records and not actual records, because it will actually go ahead and update the records if it works fine. So maybe the person who called in says, you know what, my name is not Tima, my name is Pratima, so we can update that. And maybe my phone number is not that. I'm just gonna update whatever phone number and hit next. That should update the flow. Now, there are ways you can make this more sophisticated looking. So maybe when you hit next, it just another screen comes up saying, hey, your contact was updated. So you can do all that, but due to lack of time, or we just don't want to extend this video anymore. So you can add a screen element here, your flow is successfully updated, your contact, and also add lighting components in addition. So I hope this video was helpful, and please let me know if I missed anything, or if there are other use cases that you would like me to make videos on. I'm gonna make another video on auto launched flow, basic flow, beginner. So hopefully you find it all helpful. Thank you so much for watching.